Oh, also, can you, never mind.
Good morning, everyone. Give us just a minute or two to let everybody else join in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we'll wait about another minute or two to let more people join in before we go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. We're waiting about another minute to let everybody else continue joining. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Responding to DIR Cooperative Program Co-op Solicitations. We are glad to have you with us today. Before we get started, let's cover a couple housekeeping items. Just a reminder that you can change your audio by switching between your computer and phone. We want to remind everybody that everybody is muted this morning, but if you have questions or if you have something to address with the group, please open your Q&A box and put your questions in there. We will make time to answer those as we go today. But before we get started, if you would, please raise your hands real quick and let us know that you can hear us pretty clearly this morning so we have a good audio connection. All right, thank you for that. Also, we will be making a handout available after the webinar ends. Today's speakers are going to be Stephanie Harrison, Director of Cooperative Procurements, and Vanya Raymakers, Procurement Lead. Here's some more of our cooperative procurement team. We have Alexis Jimerson, Team Lead of Cooperative Procurements, Jared Fortenberry, a Procurement Lead, Pete Castles, a Procurement Lead, Scott Wilson, also a Procurement Lead, Julia Klingeman, Procurement Lead, Tuvan, I'm probably going to butcher her last name, Hun, also Procurement Lead, Moshe Thomas, Procurement Lead, and James Burkhart, Procurement Lead. Today's agenda will be going over training objectives, our mission and vision and benefits, cooperative contracts program, DIR co-op solicitation process, step-by-step completing solicitation forms, VIS portal/bid stamp, and creating your pricing form to be discussed at this afternoon session, do's and don'ts, Q&A and FAQs, and then closing. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Vanya.
So good morning, everybody. I've been looking forward to this training because I really would like to help vendors provide DIR with better response documents in order to expedite evaluation processes and negotiation. Before I get started, I like to give you a couple of disclaimers, and that is just something that I do for my own self, and that is I do not speak English as my primary language. Therefore, if my training skills and training methods and how I speak, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time because sometimes I do say things very direct and sometimes I do say things in Portuguese English. And so you're welcome to ask questions if you don't understand my way of speaking. I truly appreciate it. The next disclaimer I like to make, as you guys know, both in government and life, change is a constant. So everything we're going to talk about today that we're going to post to YouTube is for reference for you to use now and to train new employees on your organization and any other staff member that might require this type of training. It's going to be available. But you need to remember that everything here is not strictly focused on DBIDs. We're using the DBIDs as a platform for reaching as much vendor as possible because that's our major solicitation in the works. So keep in mind that forms and details of forms might change, but the concepts that we're going to talk about is going to be constant. It's always the same concepts. And if the forms change a little bit, just be sure to remember that that is just the way government works. We're on a constant state of change. Next step, next slide. So we're going to start with providing the vendor community with a basic understanding, and COOP stands for Cooperative Program Contracts. And the program itself, we really want you guys to understand what we are, what we do, and what our purposes are. And we're going to discuss that. Also, we like to provide the vendor community with a basic understanding of the DIR COOP solicitation process for you to understand that contracts are not given. They're not signed up for it. This is a competitive process, solicitation process. Just like any other agency solicit for any contract. We're the only difference that we, as cooperative contract, as you will learn, our solicitation process is for multiple contract awards in most instances. We're going to demonstrate the importance of each step in the procurement process. We're going to demonstrate the value of becoming a DIR cooperative program partner. And we're going to provide information to streamline the cooperative program RFO response processes for vendors. So we're going to try to help you guys understand where you can spend your time and where you should not waste time. And you will see what I'm talking about. Next slide. Now I like to turn it over to my manager, Stephanie, and she is going to provide you guys with the DIR mission and vision or cooperative contract.
Next slide, please. The DIR's mission is to serve Texas government by leading the state's technology strategy, protecting state technology infrastructure, and offering innovative and cost-effective solutions for all levels of government. DIR's vision is transforming how Texas government serves Texas. Some of the services that we offer are IT procurement and contracting, shared technology services, data management, Texas.gov, which is where most of y'all in Texas will go to renew your driver's license, technology leadership, communications technology services, and cybersecurity. Next slide, please. Vanya?
Yes, the cooperative contracts program. Let's talk about next slide. The cooperative contract benefits. The cooperative contract program creates savings for the state of Texas customers, but not just for them, but for all of our customers, volunteers as well as state agencies. Leverage the state buying power to obtain lower price for our customers. It contains a best value view of a competitive solicitation selection. And we also do bulk purchasing initiatives from the cooperative contracts, program contracts. We do streamline the purchasing process for our customers. We reduce purchasing and contract cycle time. As you know, a solicitation process will take anywhere between 18 months, 6 to 18 months, depending on what it is. And most of our customers will save a lot of time because they will do their contracts to our cooperative program. We reduce duplicate efforts. We access historically underutilized businesses by having our hub plan and our subcontracting into every one of our contracts. The benefits for you, our vendors, simplify sales process for our vendors, access to public entities, and approximately $3.5 billion in sales per year. So I call that a pretty good field for you to plant your seeds and to you to receive a lot of good returns because we give you so much exposure. Next slide. Go ahead, Stephanie. Oh, no, that's still me. Never mind. Let's start by understanding what DIR cooperative program is not. So this is a thing that has been going on forever, and it's very important for you guys to understand. DIR cooperative program is not a list of pre-approved vendors. It is not purchasing goods and service under the COOP posted solicitation. So when you see a cooperative contract solicitation, we are not buying anything. So when you respond to these solicitations, you need to keep that in mind. Does not have an application process to become a DIR vendor. So you cannot just enter an application in some nice system and become a DIR vendor. You must respond to a solicitation and you must be in a competitive range of those solicitations in order to receive negotiation to a contract. DIR does not have a sign up or registration list to become a DIR vendor. Those are things that people think our cooperative program is, and it's very important for you to know that it is not. Next. So our training goals are a little different from our training objectives because our training goals when we do a lot of the DIR events is to inform new vendors. And in this group, there's new vendors and there is current vendors. But we like to provide new vendors as much training as possible. It is to promote hub vendors networking. So whenever we do meetings, we share the information of all the prime vendors that are in the calls, in the pre-proposal conference to hub vendors network. We reduce cost all the way around from customers to vendors and through DIR. We also promote competition. And like I told you, this is a competitive program. And also we try to remove as much barriers as possible to assist vendors to provide us with a better solicitation response documentation. Next slide. So also the cooperative program, responding to a DIR open solicitation. When you're doing that, you need to read the scope of each solicitation. DIR cooperative program scope is not generic and is not repetitive. This team is very key into producing a scope of work that makes sense, that provides information. We usually post solicitations for products and service. Be aware of what that solicitation is for. And sometimes there is solicitations that will encompass all of them, products and services. Be an active authorized vendor to do business with the state of Texas. I am going to drive this down today very, very much because it is an issue. Your franchise tax and your Secretary of State registration to do business in Texas are mandatory. You cannot get a contract awarded without it. And there are details in both of those registrations that must be maintained constantly. It's not something you do once and forget. As your company grows and changes, you need to keep up with your registration. DIR does not have a vendor list or application process for vendors program. A vendor must respond to an RFO to become a DIR cooperative program partner. Note, a vendor does not have to be registered to respond to a solicitation. However, a vendor must be registered and have an active status to be awarded a contract under the cooperative program. Next slide. Now, Stephanie will take over and talk to you guys about the history of DIR sales.
Next slide, please. So historically, the cooperative contract program has grown over the past few years with DIR and DIR. So the cooperative contracts, we have since 2019 gone from $2 billion in sales to 2023, which we're right at $3.4 billion in sales. These are annual sales under the cooperative contract program only. Our highest sales are coming from our state agency customers and our local government, followed closely by education. State agencies make up 25% of our total spend generally, and then all of our other agencies and voluntary customers make up the remaining spend under the program. Next slide, please. So when you're looking at the cooperative contracts these are sales by the millions, you can see the pie chart kind of breaks this down to where we have almost an even split between state agencies and K through 12, but then local government is also a big portion of our sales. Vanya will go over the eligible customers here in just a minute on explain who can purchase under cooperative contracts. And then also higher ed is sitting at about $500 million in sales annually for DIR cooperative contracts, and we're already exceeding these numbers in 2024. Next slide, please.
So let's talk about the eligible customers. Next slide. So there are two types of customers. One is the state agencies, which are required to use DIR contracts. They don't have options. This is what they need to use. And if they do not use a DIR cooperative contract to buy, they will need to have an exemption request approved by DIR. However, we have a number of volunteer customers and approved customers through the legislative that says, yes, we will. And on top of all of that, we also have out-of-state customers. So let's talk about our local government, which is over 6,200 plus customers. We have cities, counties, public school, municipalities, junior college, special purpose districts. On other organizations, we have ERCOT, Lower Colorado, private schools, private or independent institutions, volunteer fire department, public safety, hospitals, public entities outside of Texas. So this is not a complete list by any means. So vendors should check the DIR website on a regular basis for any changes of our customers' eligibility. If later on today, we're going to walk through the DIR website and I can show you exactly where this is going to be so that you can constantly review your customer list that you can approach for sales under the cooperative contract. So next slide. So DIR serves entity that serves the public. So we serve government, judiciary, utility organizations, education, and public services entity. So as you can see, we have a very big range. And when we say that DIR is changing the way we serve Texans, we are making a lot of strides in that vision and that objective for our agency. Next slide. So here's the DIR website. When you first get in dir.texas.gov, you are going to go to a little place called the IT Solutions and Service under the customer eligibility. So you're going to go to selling through DIR, and then customer eligibility will be one of those blocks, okay? Next step, next slide. So you also have out-of-state customers, and you will see a list of them here. But let's just say you have a customer that is out of state of Texas that wants to buy from you, but they're not showing on our out-of-state customer list, you can just have them fill out this form online to become a DIR partner. And then there's a process they go through that will explain to your customer, and they can become a DIR customer so that you can then sell to them. So there are lots of options and flexible processes that we use to increase your customer base. And you can help us do that. If you approach a customer that is not on our approved list, then either suggest to us or have them sign up to become one. Next slide. So here's some of the states that you can actually work with, right? And there's a big list of them, so I'm not going to go each one for you, but I want you to see that there is a large, very large customer base that you can promote your contract. Okay, next slide. So now we're going to talk about the DIR cooperative program solicitation process, and Stephanie is going to be talking to you about that.
Okay. So the solicitation process, next slide, please. From our end on DIR, we have to do the planning, pre-solicitation notice, market engagement, request for comment. We don't generally post the co-op solicitations for request for comment, but some of our enterprise solicitations and internal ones do get posted for comment, but in general, those are some of the steps. We get the solicitation together as through the pre-solicitation conferences or pre-proposal conference. These are not mandatory, but they are highly encouraged to anybody who is interested in responding to a co-op solicitation, because we go in more detail over the scope, pricing, and information that you need to respond to that specific solicitation. There's also a question and answer period for each solicitation. There is a time limit on the question and answer period, so make sure that you get those questions submitted so we can get those responded to. There's response instructions, evaluation criteria, and then value adds that we may include in our scope of the solicitation. After the solicitation that part is over, we receive all the responses that have to be submitted by the due date and time for the response to be considered for that solicitation. There's an evaluation and awarding process. Each response is reviewed at an administrative level to make sure you met the minimum requirements for submitting the response. That includes submitting all the documentation, the documents that have to be signed, have a signature on them, whether it's electronic or whether you did a wet signature and scan that document in. We have pass-fail criteria, so certain documents, if they're not submitted, like our accessibility PDAA form, if that is missing, that's a disqualification. If you do not submit a hub subcontracting plan, that is also a disqualification. We ask for clarifications on documents where we're allowed to ask for clarifications. So if you're just missing like certain information, we can ask for some clarifications, but not on missing forms or missing signatures. Those are disqualifications. Then everything is evaluated. Once it goes through the evaluation, those that score above the competitive break are then invited to negotiations. And then in negotiations, we work with you all on anything that needs to be worked out through the process, whether that is exceptions or pricing or any of the other documents that were required for the solicitation. So it can be a lengthy process, particularly driven by the number of responses that we receive. We try to keep you updated throughout the process on what we're doing, where we are, where the stages are, but we have anywhere from about 50 responses per solicitation to a couple of hundred responses per solicitation. So if we're taking every single call and every single email from everybody every day, we're not going to get to award your contract. So please be patient. Once you're notified that you're in the negotiation phase and you start working with the procurement lead, you need to remain responsive with that procurement lead, because there are a lot of vendors that respond. And so once a vendor becomes non-responsive, we'll cease to negotiate and move on to somebody else, because there's a lot of them to get awarded. Next slide, please. Part of the planning phase. So this is an opportunity for DIR to notify and engage the incumbents and any potential respondents through market engagement notices and other pre-proposal events. We post these on the Electronic State Business Daily. We also post these on our DIR website and on social media. So make sure that you're staying connected to get all of those notifications. We have forums for incumbent and potential respondents to understand the Cooperative Contracts Program. This is one of those trainings where we are providing to anybody who's interested in learning about the Cooperative Contracts Program through DIR and the solicitation process. We'll have a few of these at vendor events. We have some of these that are already recorded and online on YouTube. There is a lot of information out there for vendors on how to become a DIR vendor. We also provide opportunities for DIR to engage with potential respondents and discuss the upcoming solicitation scope requirements. That's in our pre-solicitation conference. Again, that is not mandatory, but it is highly encouraged as that goes into the details on the scope and you're able to ask solicitation specific questions. Next slide, please. The planning also provides lead time to identify new categories and market changes. For example, a few years ago, we were resoliciting for cybersecurity, and those of y'all who have worked in cybersecurity over the years know how drastically that has changed. From the previous time that we posted it, even the lingo had changed. So the vendors were previously called IT security, and now they're known as cybersecurity vendors. So we even had to update what we were calling the solicitation for the vendor community to be aware that that's the one that they need to respond to if they were interested in providing cybersecurity for the state of Texas. We assess new technology approaches. There's quite a few different ways that we do this. There's multiple vendor engagement events that are held outside of the Chief Procurement Office that DIR hosts. We have AI forums that are going on. There's a Discover DIR event that is coming up on the 22nd. There is multiple events that vendors can attend and to get additional information, as well as conferences. DIR is present at many of the IT conferences around the state and around the nation. We also determine lessons learned and improvement opportunities. Our Chief Technology Office is really engaged with the vendor community, and they like to keep us abreast of what needs to change in our solicitation. So we do get feedback from our Chief Technology Office on things that should update, things that may be obsolete. And we also get that information from the vendor community and our customers. So when we offer vendor engagement opportunities, we want to hear from you all. We want to hear what's actually thriving in the market, what needs to change, whatever the vendor engagement is posted for at that time. We appreciate you all attending and giving us that feedback, because that's how we develop the solicitations. On your end, Vanya's covered this and she'll probably cover it again, but you want to ensure that you're in good standing with the state of Texas, which means that before you are allowed to get a contract with state, you have to have an account with the Comptroller of Public Accounts, the CPA's office, and with the Secretary of State, and be registered with your vendor legal name and with the information that they're required before that contract can be signed. You don't have to be registered in order to respond, but it does slow down the process. So once you receive that negotiation notification saying that, yes, DIR would like to negotiate with you, that is the time, if you're not already registered, to go get registered, because otherwise it'll slow down and we could wind up in a situation where we have to cease to negotiate if that process is taking too long to complete. Next slide, please. During the planning stage, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was just going to say, this is for the vendors to do while we are planning, I think.
Yes. So during the planning stages, part of what you're going to want to do as a prime vendor is, if you're looking to have resellers or subcontractors on your contract, then you're going to want to engage with your hub partners. The difference in resellers and subcontractors is subcontractors are doing a service generally for you all, and the customers would not engage with them directly. Resellers, you're authorizing somebody else to resell on your behalf. That's usually a manufacturer that would authorize a reseller partner to sell on their behalf, their brand. So if you are authorizing resellers on your own contract, that is a part of your hub subcontracting plan. If you're authorizing resellers to go out and create their own proposal to a solicitation out there, you would need to provide them with a reseller letter of authorization. So you're either getting a letter of authorization as a reseller, or as a manufacturer, you're providing the reseller letters of authorization. That needs to be happening while DIR has given you a notification that we're planning to release the solicitation, and Bonnie will go over where you can find that information here in just a little bit. You will want to start obtaining accurate and current VPATs, which is your accessibility documentation. This is at a product level. You get that from the manufacturers. And you will also need to develop accurate and current PDAA, which is also an accessibility documentation. It is required on every solicitation, and that is at an agency level. That is your agency explaining how you're going to be in compliance with the ADA requirements under 508. Next slide, please. The solicitation. So DIR posts all solicitations to the State Electronic State Business Daily, or the ESBD. Those are all publicly posted. The addendum to those will also be posted on the Electronic State Business Daily. It is the vendor's responsibility to make sure that you're in the loop on that. You can register with the comptroller with the Central Masters Bidders List in order to receive those notifications. The solicitation is going to include the background, any requirements, response instructions, high-level evaluation criteria. So we break down like what percentage each section is going to be scored at. We don't give the details of the evaluation, but it's a very high-level breakdown. The key dates associated with the procurement, potential contract documents, and then your point of contact will be listed in the solicitation documents. DIR does take vendor questions during the designated Q&A answer period. If you're asking outside of that period after it has passed, it's up to DIR's discretion whether or not we are going to provide a public answer to that. But we do not answer the questions individually. Those go out into the addendum. So all vendors get the same response at the same time. Next slide, please. DIR establishes the designated points of contact on every solicitation. Do not attempt to contact other agency personnel regarding a specific solicitation other than the agency point of contact. Doing so could lead to disqualification from your participation in that solicitation. Any questions answered during phone calls, conferences, and emails are not considered official unless it's posted on the ESBD, which is that Electronic State Business Daily by an addendum. DIR posts addendums to the solicitation. Again, make sure you're monitoring the ESBD for updates. And then another thing to note on your response is that some of the forms will be filled out and provided in an original format. Please don't convert those to PDFs or any other versions unless we specifically say that that's allowable. As what happens, some of that information will get truncated, especially on a PDF conversion, and you're missing part of your response if you're converting it in a form that we did not ask for it to be submitted in. Next slide, please. Make sure that you're tailoring the response to the stated goals and objectives of solicitation. Just because you responded before and received a contract before is no guarantee that that's going to happen the next time around. These are all competitively bid, and the responses that we have received over the years have increased for the majority of the solicitations, so it is highly competitive. Make sure that your response is accurate and updated for the solicitation that you responded to. Address all responsive questions and instructions. Neglecting to comply with the instructions may not only cost you points on the evaluation, but it could also lead to disqualification and or a cease to negotiate with the, if you make it to negotiations, and we're trying to work through some of those through clarifications. You want to make sure that you're following all instructions, especially on pricing, which forms need to be uploaded, which ones need to be signed, who it needs to be signed by, and that every piece of your response is filled out and there's an answer provided. Make sure you review your response again before you submit it. Do not submit an incomplete response thinking that you'll have time to come back and correct things later. We have seen it happen way too many times where that was the intent and the time got away from them and the solicitation closed. So now they have an incomplete response and are not eligible to move forward in the process at all. When we post the addenda, there is a form that will be posted with the addenda to acknowledge the addenda. So make sure that you sign that and include that with your response. Next slide, please. Evaluations, negotiations, and awarding. As I stated, we have received anywhere from about 50 to a couple hundred responses per solicitation. So this is a patience exercise once the response is submitted. It's not a quick turnaround. These are evaluated. You will receive a notification if you're invited to negotiations. You will also receive a notification if you did not make it to negotiations. So you will receive an email either way from the point of contact on whether you're moving forward to negotiations or whether your response didn't qualify to move forward to negotiations. Be sure to comply with the agency interaction policy. Again, avoid contacting other DIR staff. This includes going to executive level staff and asking on status. They can't tell you what the status is. Most of them aren't in the loop to that level, but they're also not going to share that information. DIR can conduct vendor discussions to clarify requirements and responses, and we do this generally during the evaluation stage. During the negotiation stage. If we need to clarify something during the evaluation stage, there's very specific things that we can clarify. A lot of them you either complete it or you don't. And then again, once all evaluations are completed, we notify the apparent awardees that you're moving forward to negotiations, but now there's another process and there's a lot of you all to negotiate with. So you get the notification, and then once the procurement lead starts engaging with you saying what they need and when they need it, that's the time to really get involved, to stay involved, and to make sure that your point of contact on your end stays up to date and that we have the right person that we're supposed to be working with to get the negotiations through. You will also receive notification if you are not moving forward to negotiations. Next slide, please. DIR considers any new information obtained orally or in writing throughout the negotiation process. There's caveats to that. You cannot fix a non-signed document that you would not have made it to negotiation. So if you don't sign your offer, you don't sign the HubSub contracting plan, that was before we even got to evaluation. So those we can't go back and fix because you just didn't do it. Excessive exceptions to the DIR standard terms and conditions may result in delayed negotiations and or no longer being considered for potential award. So on the cooperative contracts program, we have about 800 current cooperative contracts with vendors. Those are prime contracts. Those are not any resellers or subs considered. Those are the prime contracts. One of the big perks to our customers for having the standard terms and conditions is that they're standard terms and conditions. And DIR utilizes the same terms and conditions across those contracts. When the vendors come in and start taking a lot of exceptions to the standard terms and conditions, it devalues that value add that the customers are getting from already knowing what the terms and conditions are, because now we have 800 different contracts. We really don't, because DIR is not going to negotiate like that, but you want to make sure that you're taking as few exceptions. 0 exceptions is better, but the fewer, if there are exceptions that your agency must take, for whatever reason, there's no guarantee that that's going to be approved or even approved in the way that it's submitted. And it may result in a cease to negotiate if DIR cannot reach agreement on the terms and conditions. Also, a lack of response to DIR may result in a cease to negotiate actions. This happens a lot more than we would like it to, where the vendor has not kept us up to date on who their point of contact is. And basically you quit responding. So we are forced to cease to negotiate because there's nobody to negotiate with. And we have to move on to the next set of vendors. Next slide, and turn it back over to Vanya.
Hello again. Before I keep going, I would like to answer a couple of the questions on the list because they're very important for you to continue with the training so that you can understand. One of the questions is, if DIR is not purchasing anything with these solicitations, what are these solicitations for? Cooperative programs establish multiple contracts for approved customers to use. So think of us as not as much an e-commerce, but in a way, what it is we provide customers with over 800 contracts for different scope, for different items, for our customers to go into it, contact vendors and purchase from. So there's a whole process for cooperative contracts. So think of us pretty much like a GSA contract or a NASPO contract or a TIPS. These are other cooperative contracts that are similar to DIR. So RFO stands for Request for Offer, which is the government requirement for us to do technology purchasing. There I'll go with Request for Offers versus RFPs or IFBs, which have all different contents. But whenever you're doing technology purchasing, you are going to use a request for offer, which is what DIR does. And goods, what are the goods and services being requested? Well, we are requesting anything from computers to development contracts to staff. For our scope of work is large, and you just need to pay attention to each solicitation scope and what is asking, okay? So these were the ones I thought we needed to answer before I move on. So let's talk about what completing a solicitation form. Every cooperative contract or COOP solicitation is going to have these basic forms. They're not all going to look exactly with the same, but they're going to be pretty much similar because the information we require for this competitive process is mostly the same. What changes a lot is the scope of the solicitation, so which changes the way you answer these forms. And what changes a lot is the pricing format, which is different for every solicitation. So strongly recommend that you take from these step-by-step the basics, and always remember that you must read the solicitation completely in order for you to understand how your forms will need to be responded to. And I will touch on that in every single one of these form completions. Let's go to the next step, next slide. So the number one exhibit that you are going to find on any cooperative contract is called the Exhibit A. That is where we collect your vendor information, your company information. That is the document that commits you to this solicitation and this contract. The data on Exhibit A is very critical to negotiations because it provides DIR with the basics of how your company is formed. So let's go through the sections of the Exhibit A. Next slide. So the first thing Exhibit A does, it provides critical information about your company. The next thing, it provides information regarding your eligibility to respond to an RFO and binds the company to the response content. So whatever you provide us, all the multiple forms you're going to send us, the Exhibit A is the one that is making you responsible and binds your company to this RFO response. And next, Exhibit A requires a signature in order to make your response legal and responsive. So during the administrative review, if you don't sign Exhibit A, you are automatically disqualified, because I can't take a blank check if it doesn't have a signature. Just keep that in mind. It must have your company authorized signature. Next slide. Legal entity name, that's going to be right at the very top. Consistent across all the registration. Please, pretty please. Your legal entity name is the company name that was registered when your company was formed. And by the way, LLC, Inc., or any other type of your company formation is very important. They're not the same. And so please be consistent. Fill out the forms with your actual legal entity name, and make sure that when you register at the Secretary of the State or franchise tax, that your name matches in all the forms you provide DIR, and it matches with all your registration. The CMBL registration is not required, but it's strongly recommended, because that allows you to receive notices electronically from the ESBD on all of our posting addendums, posting changes, posting meetings. So you need to have, because the CMBL is where the ESBD connects to send out notices to vendors. Note, that includes the bid stamp account. It should match the legal name and other registration. So DIR has an electronic system by which you are going to respond to a solicitation, which we're going to get in detail how to use this system later this afternoon. Today, we're going to talk about forms. But remember, when requesting your bid stamp account to respond to a solicitation, that also needs to match your legal entity name. Okay, next slide. So 1B, this talks about, it says your company friendly name or DBA. So in order for you to have a DBA, it must be registered as such. You can't just make up a DBA and write it down on this space. It's not what your company marketing name is. It's not what your company uses for their products. The DBA must be registered. It must be part of your Texas registration. And your DBA usually gets registered with the county, and it needs to be approved. So make sure the DBA registration is active, because they do expire. And you need to constantly update all of your registration if your DBA expires and it's no longer valid. Okay, next. Next slide. So here's what your registration for the Texas Secretary of State, when I go in and I do a search for your company, this is what I look at. And what does it have to have? It has to say in existence. Very important. I block the other information on this search because I wanted to show you simply what we're looking at. The next slide, please. So this is your franchise tax. So this is what your franchise tax registration looks like. And when you see this thing right there, it has to be active. Okay? It has to be active right there, right? To transact business in Texas, it has to be active, which means you have to provide your annual reports to the CPA. You have to keep your information up to date. You got to keep your addresses consistent. All of these pieces of your registration is your responsibility. And by the time you get to negotiation, it becomes critical. So it is your responsibility to maintain this registration. Next. So this is what your CMBL registration would look like. And one of the things that are critical here is your commodity codes. So remember that when you signed up for the CMBL, whatever products your company sells, you need to include those commodity codes in your registration. I found several vendors that have registered to the CMBL, but their commodity codes are blank. What does that mean? It means that you will not get notices because all solicitations are based on NIGP codes. That's how the government works. And the ESBD will look for the commodity codes that the RFOs posted in order to go to the CMBL and send out notices, okay? So make sure that you understand your company's services and products and that you understand what the NIGP code is for and how to complete your CMBL account, okay? And learning about commodity codes and NIGP codes, a whole new training that if we find that is necessary for our vendors, DIR may in the future puts together a class for that. But for right now, just know if you go into the CMBL and this right up here where it says commodity description, if you open that, it will tell you what to select and how to do it. So just keep that in mind if you're a new vendor. And for current vendors that are on the CMBL, make sure you keep your commodity codes up to date because they do change, okay, throughout the years. Next. So question number 2, it's going to say Controller of Public Accounts identification number. So there's a lot of numbers that people think goes into this spot, but it's very important that you find the correct number. If you are a current Texas vendor, you know what that number is. It will show on your CMBL registration. The franchise tax number starts with a 320 because they don't put any other there. And you can put that number on this field because that's what you have, your controller's ID number. Or you can skip that and just put your FIN number and leave this field blank if you're new and you do not have a registration number yet, okay? Next. So the number 3 question on the exhibit A is your DUNS number. Guys, this is very important. The Duns and Bradstreet information is verified to qualify you as a financial established company, that your financials are in order that you are not a risk to the state or that you are not in some kind of financial issues going on. And our financial department takes this information very seriously. So when you put your DUNS number here, the thing to remember is make sure it's the right company, the DUNS number, because we're going to look at it. And if it doesn't match your exhibit A and your registrations, it's not the right DUNS number. Something is wrong. So you need to validate your DUNS number and your Bradstreet's information, Duns and Bradstreet information on a constant basis. You need to keep that up to date. And the most important thing you need to remember is that your DUNS account need to reflect your company corporate address. Okay, I'm going to say this a lot throughout this because it applies to several pieces of the solicitation response. You must have your corporate company address so that when you put your information, that our financial people can take your exhibit A and your DUNS registration and compare. Your name matches, your address matches, and your score validates that your company is in good financial standing, okay? Number 4, the federal employer, the FIN number. This is a very important number for you to put in because we are moving towards using FIN numbers versus TINS number or federal tax or franchise tax 320 numbers. So it's very important that you understand that the FIN number needs to be accurate. And I understand from experience that several companies have different FIN numbers because they're umbrellas or they're subsidiaries or any of that stuff. The key here is whatever FIN number you use, it needs to match your exhibit A. It needs to match your registrations. It needs to match your name. So keep that in mind, okay? Now, next. So this is where you can find your franchise tax number. I showed you this early, but right here, Texas identification number, it will be on that field. So you can use this number. Next slide. So it also will show here. It'll show your iTax ID number. It will show your FAN number. These two things must match. Okay. Next slide. And here is your CMBL. If you are a CMBL register, right at the very top, it says vendor ID. That is your vendor identification number for Texas, okay? So there are 3 places you can look up for this number if you don't know where the numbers are. And you can leave these fields blank except for your federal ID if you do not know what the numbers are because you're brand new to Texas, okay? And you're not registered yet. Your federal ID number needs to be in your Exhibit A. Next slide. So always remember, if you're not a registered vendor, leave it blank. Use your company FIN number, okay? Very important. Next slide, please. Exhibit A1. This one is what I call, yeah, that's exactly real. It's like, ooh, that one. Exception request tables. So here are 2 things about exception request tables that you need to learn. One, you might want to talk to your legal people that is going to review our Appendix A, DIR Cooperative Program Standard Terms and Conditions is where you will get the information to create your exception table. So the things you need to know about your Exhibit A1, next slide, is follow the instructions to make sure you're using the correct form, because current vendors have a tendency of picking up the spreadsheet from 3 years ago that had their exception in it and just submit it like it was yesterday. Gentlemen, the years pass, so does law. Everything changes. What you submitted 2-3 years ago might not be valid today. Our Appendix A, our Exhibit A, A1 will represent your terms and conditions for DIR, which also changed through the years. So please do not assume that it's the same. And we are going to a Word document versus the spreadsheets, we believe. And either one, as long as it's part of your solicitation document, always use the form provided under your solicitation documents. Okay? And make sure that you have correct information when you're putting an Exhibit A1 together. Provide reference to the document and section being addressed. So terms and conditions, section such and such, copy and paste the section to the correct block of the form, and then turn in your track changes and start putting in your proposed language changes. Cross what you don't want and make sure it's clear for legal to review, okay? Then and then provide the alternative language. Next step. Next slide. So here's the things I want you to know about exceptions, guys. Number 1, excessive exceptions will disqualify you totally. So don't send me 100 pages of exception, guys. Okay, please. Be consistent. If you are a manufacturer of a product, I can see you having exceptions that will protect your product's intellectual property or different types of things. But I want you to remember something, and please, please, please tell your legal people this. If a term and condition comes with a law or a government code attached to it, chances are DIR cannot change the law. The last time I looked, we are still abiding by the state of Texas government procurement laws. So keep that in mind, okay? And make sure that DIR has the discretion to accept or negotiate terms, okay? And always, always remember to fill out the form correctly, provide the correct information. So let's say this is the form, the section is the section 5.1, title, intellectual property. Exception. Why is it that you're concerned about the intellectual property? We want to protect our IPI or our company, whatever it is, your exception justification. And then proposed language, you're going to copy and paste the section 5.1 into this block. You're going to turn your track changes on, and then you're going to propose your language so that legal can see it. They don't have to chase where this thing is or make believe they know what you wrote. Okay? And then once you submit this, when it's time for negotiation, DIR will provide you responses. That is step 1. It never changes, so don't try to skip it and try to get to legal before that. We're not going to allow it. We're going to have legal review, give you response. They send it to you. If you have additional issues on any of the DIR response, then at that time, we will schedule a meeting for you to discuss it with legal. Okay, so exception doesn't immediately get you a straight line to legal. There are a process to be considered. Excessive exceptions, please keep that in mind. It is an issue. Exceptions always delay negotiations. If you have an exceptions document, it's going to take longer for negotiation because our legal department don't just negotiate exceptions with our group. They have all the other DIR combined in order for them to do this. So the volume is large, the staff is small, timeline lingers. Vendors with no exceptions to terms and conditions move up on the negotiation a lot faster. Keep that in mind. Next. Can we have a show of hands? Who needs a break, a 5 to 10 minute break before we go into the next one?
Vanya, I have a couple of questions specifically on Exhibit A that
Go
I want
ahead.
to read, and then you can answer. It says, so DUNS registration is required, or can we use a cage code? And then everybody's gone away from using DUNS. Why is DIR still utilizing DUNS?
That's a good question, but it is what financial department requires of us right now. When that change, then all the forms and all of the DR documents will change with it. But as of today, that's what we require. And yes, you must have a DUNS registration account in order to propose for financial review. Go ahead.
It says, if our company is headquartered outside of Texas but has offices that we do business from in Texas, how should we provide those different addresses?
The form on Exhibit A does have fields where you put alternative addresses for locations where the contract is going to be serviced. But your registration should always be your corporate address. Next.
And this one I'll answer because we get this asked a lot. Are electronic signatures permissible? Yes, if it's a verifiable electronic signature. Going in and typing a signature in Word and just using a different font is not an official electronic signature. It needs to be one that is a verifiable electronic signature, like either Adobe Sign or DocuSign or something along those lines. If you're utilizing electronic signature, typed in electronic or typed in font is not a signature and will not bind your response.
So another thing about signature, Stephanie, is that you cannot cut and paste a signature from a different document and put it into a Word document and send it to us as a liable signature.
Right. It has to be an official electronic signature or an actual wet ink signature that you've signed the document and scanned it in, and that is the signature on it. I think those are the only ones related to Exhibit A. So if we want to take a quick break, I don't know what the vote was.
Yeah, I didn't see how many people raised their hands for a break. I'm not sure. If they wanted to continue, we can.
Like 10 to 12 people saying they would like a break.
All right, so let's take a 5 minutes, and then we can return and start on Exhibit B.
Okay, meet back at 11:09.
I mean,
All right, everybody, welcome back. We'll go ahead and get started with the second half of the training.
I wanted to answer a couple of questions that have come in. I'll answer these here before we move on to the next section. So one of them is there's some confusion on DIR and co-op, or how they differ from each other, how are they related. DIR is our agency, Department of Information Resources. Co-op is the division within DIR. So we have cooperative procurement, and then we have cooperative contracts. And this specific presentation is regarding the cooperative procurement contracting portion of DIR. Let's see. There are some questions in here that are very like solicitation specific. If it's solicitation specific, you'll need to address that with your with the procurement lead that is signed to that solicitation in order to remain eligible under that solicitation. And there's a question specifically about how is DBITS different from ITSOC. ITSOC is services only. DBITS is a little bit different in that there's specific categories under DBITS that are allowed to be provided. I think Vanya has a pretty good response for that to share with everybody, but basically ITSAC is actually already in progress. DBITS is yet to come, but it's different categories and different services that are able to be provided under those two. And with ITSAC, it is you're only getting the person, you're not getting like the whole deliverable based out of it. They're coming in to do a specific job, whereas DBITS is a lot more statement of work based. They may be doing a big project. It may be a team of people doing a project for DBITS. And then there's a question on, can we bid on partial requirements? Can we fulfill certain proportions that we can fulfill only? Would you accept partial bids? It depends on the solicitation. You need to read the solicitation and the requirements. For most of the co-op solicitations, we do not require that you provide everything that is within scope. Well, our scopes are pretty large, and we'll go over some of those here in just a little bit on kind of what the scopes are and where you can find that information. But you need to read the solicitation and respond to the requirements, and then you can ask those questions during that solicitation Q&A period. And those are the ones that I wanted to address now. We can go on to Exhibit B.
All right, so let's go to Exhibit B. And this is going to always be a form on our cooperative program because it's about your company history and experience. And it's about how your company history and experience meets the scope of the solicitation that is posted. It is very important. Two things to remember about Exhibit B. We don't usually need a, say, a manual of your company. We do not need, you need to remember that you're not selling your product. So this cannot be a sales pitch. This is about your company history and experience in relation to the scope of the solicitation. So if I am selling software, you need to tell me your history and experience, how long you've been selling software, how long you've been servicing software, and what kind of software that you're doing it, what are you proposing type of software, versus giving me a history on development of software or how your company services certain software. If it is a software products, you need to give me experience of the software products that you are selling. So just keep that in mind. And also remember to read this form in detail because this form is always evaluated and it always has a percentage of your valuation scores. And from history and experience, it seems to me, this is one of the forms that vendors get the lowest scores because they're not paying attention to what is needed, okay? So when you fill out Exhibit B, what I want you to think is, if you are an evaluator, think about your audience, you are an evaluator and you are making sure that this company has the experience and history to fulfill the scope of the RFO. That's how you write this. Think about what is it that you need from your company immense history that applies to the solicitation scope. Okay, next slide. So let's talk about this. So the first thing to remember, answer each question. Use the form provided. Do not create a binded dossier, please. Use the form provided. Do not create elaborate forms. You run the chance of missing critical questions. Keep it simple and to the point, and always remember your audience. Okay, next step. In more than 2 pages, provide a detailed history of your company. So what is it that I'm looking for here? When was your company formed? Okay, what year, where was formed, how long ago? I don't need to know that the owner of the company has 50 years of experience, or that your company was formed in 1905, but it has merged since 1905 until now. I don't need that. I need to know when your company was formed, what year was formed, and what basis of your company is. How long you've been doing business. So if the RFO is for software, for example, how long you've been in business selling software. If you've been in business for 100 years, but you used to sell watches, that is not reliable. That is not related to the scope. So always read the scope, answer based on the scope. How long your company have been in business, the number of years you've been selling the products and services for this RFO. There's a lot of companies that are very diversified. So you have companies that sell certain cable stuff, so cybersecurity equipment. Some of your company even diversified to sell HVACs and construction wiring. And if my solicitations for software, that has nothing to do with it. So focus on the scope itself. How long have your company been selling the products? Directly relation to the scope. So always reference the scope. Next question. Next slide. So continue on Exhibit B. Have your company been sold, merged, or purchased by other companies? That is important, but be short and describe it, each situation with dates and details of the sale or mergers that have occurred through the years. Because if you've been in business for, say, 20 years, but during the 20 years, your company has sold and been merged several times, and if you only say you've been in business for 2 years, you might not qualify. But if you've been in business for 10 and things just change, explain that so that an evaluator can see the difference and you still get the credit for the many years you've been doing business. Okay? Did you keep your name? Or is it changed? If so, list all the different names it has been in the past. Did your company sold its asset, or have they been assigned to a new owner? A lot of companies, when sold, the split. Some gets assets only, other gets everything. Be specific, allow the evaluator to see that you have the experience needed, but here are your circumstances, okay? Don't go into marketing or selling language. We're not buying products. The evaluation is about your company, not anyone specific. So leave owner's history out of this section, please. Keep in mind, this is about your company. Next slide. So a lot of times, these forms will have a section that says, for example, if I am doing a solicitation for several types of things, I might want to know which of those you're bidding on. When you're not required to bid in every single portion of the RFO, I might want to know how many vendors are providing SaaS, how many are providing a different kind, license or related service, or follow the scope, follow the question. And if it says indicate which category of the RFO you're providing for this solicitation, then focus on answering that question. If it has a checklist where there's several categories and they want to know which category you bid on, just make sure you click the right sections. Don't leave it blank because you won't get score for it.
Vanya,
Okay? Yes, ma'am.
There's a question on here on what's the difference between services and related services in the technology category.
Oh, sure, I can relate that. Related services is more driven to maintenance and support of a specific item. On hardware will be the warranty and the extended warranty. Those are related service that is sold by manufacturer, right? Services is stuff that you provide like installation, configuration, testing, assessment, business analysis. Those are services. Related service is totally related to the software or the product that you are selling. Sometimes vendors do provide related service, and sometimes related services are sold through a company, through the manufacturer. Either way, that's the difference, okay? Don't skip any questions you think is being answered on the next question. Read each question, follow its instructions. You list what parts of the offer your company is responding to in detail. So in this question, sometimes I'm going to say, select the categories you're doing. And then I say, for each category you're providing, give me a little history of your company with that item. So example is simple. Say you're going to provide me software as a services. Then under the next section, you're going to take software as a service and you're going to give me a little blur of how long you've been doing software as a service, what type of services you provide along with this subscription. Does it need hardware? What is it that software services buy? And if you're doing hardware, then what type of hardware are you selling? How does it relate to the scope? Read the question. Do not skip questions, okay? So just be mindful of the scope and the questions. Always relate. And for current vendors, here's a hint. Don't copy and paste the answers from last year, because I can find them, and so can every evaluator that has an idea of your company, because we've read it before, right? So don't copy and paste, gentlemen. You can save some time if you want to, but always update your information to relate to the solicitation you are responding to. Your company history may not change, but your company history might be different depending on the solicitation and the questions being asked. Be mindful of that information, please. Next question.
Just so I want to clarify that
Yes.
each question is scored individually. So
Yes.
if you are trying to reference another question, the evaluators are not required to go back and search for your answers. So each question and answer is evaluated independently and is not contingent on the previous answer unless we specifically note that in the solicitation document. So we do have a lot of vendors that miss out on points because they're like, well, see, I answered this question and so the evaluators score each one separately. So it doesn't, they're not required to go look for your answers.
Exactly. And that's why I emphasize use the form provided. Do not create elaborate response documents with your logos and all of that stuff. Use the form required, make it easy for the evaluators to find answers. So another thing that we need to do is when a question 2 has a list, and then it asks for you to summarize your experience based on what you selected. We talked about this. Make sure your paragraphs are relayable and marked correctly. So if there's 5 different categories and you're going to do 2 of them, make sure you have 2 sections for each category of how your experience covers the requirement of that RFO for that section, okay? Read the requirements, guys. Not every RFO is the same. Make sure to follow the instructions, okay? So as you can see here, if I choose software, then I'm going to talk about software license and my experience. I'm going to talk about SaaS subscriptions and what my experience is. Then I'm going to talk related services and what my experience is. So if you check those 3 boxes on question 2, on question 3, you're going to provide the experience related to those categories. Don't make it generic. Don't make it where it's not specific, or don't use one paragraph to cover all 5 categories. The evaluators are not going to score it that way. Okay? The key to address every section, that's a key to Exhibit B, and every category in detail and not miss any of the items listed in the question. Okay, next slide. So question 4 is a table that needs to be filled out. Blank tables usually don't get scored. So some people says to me, okay, well, what if I don't serve this market right now? What if I'm a brand new vendor and I am selling to public, just to outside, not government at all, right? That will fall under other. So you will be able to answer the question. So software is marketing segment is other, or you can say public other / public sector. Number of year experience with that market. Okay. Some of you may not have a cooperative contract, but you have done business with the state, with the education agency. This is not related to DIR contracts. This is related to your company sales segment breakdown. All we are looking for here is to see if your company have the correct experience for each market that DIR feels are our biggest market segments. Texas government, county, cities, and education, as you saw on our sales slides, is our biggest customers, right? So I want you to answer this question, and I wanted to make sure you know that the number of experience for sector gets added up as your company total experience, right? And if you want to combine the products and service simply by saying software or software and related service, your products and services got to be based on the RFO requirements. So if you tell me you're selling books to the education and you give me 5 years, that doesn't count. Okay. If it's a software solicitation and you're selling hardware, that doesn't count. So be specific. The key is to address every category based on the scope of the RFO, and do not miss any of the items listed in question 203. So everything in Exhibit B is going to be connected. So exhibit, question, ask what categories of the RFO you're responding to. You're going to check mark. And then it's going to say, okay, give me your experience based on each category. So you're going to list those. And then question 4 is going to say, based on what you're selling up there on question 2 and 3, what are your total years of experience based on DIR, not DIR contracts, but DIR top selling markets. Okay. Next question.
I got a couple of questions here, Vanya.
Go ahead.
It looks like people are out there on the ESBD currently looking for the solicitation. There's not a posted solicitation. It's the pre-solicitation notice currently for DBIT. So the actual solicitation is not posted yet. This is a training webinar to get people ready to respond to any co-op contract opportunity that DIR posts. So this is a generic training. This is not scope specific. This is not a solicitation specific training. This is a generic DIR cooperative procurement, how to respond to a cooperative procurement solicitation. So that's one. So there is nothing posted on ESBD for you to go look for the documents. This will be posted on YouTube as one of our trainings. DIR has a lot of videos on YouTube. So if you go look for Department of Information Resources, which is the agency, then you can look at on YouTube. You can see there's a lot of different YouTube trainings that are on there. And then the other question is, these are the questions that are currently on our exhibits. They can change from solicitation to solicitation. What we're going over today is a very high level of, this is the type of information we're expecting to see, because what we're seeing is that a lot of these get left blank, or they put in A, or there's just not enough information for you to get scored in that section, and vendors are losing points or not getting points at all because of incomplete solicitations. So again, this is a generic training. It's not solicitation specific to get vendors ready to respond to any of our cooperative contract solicitations. Thanks,
And-
Vanya.
No problem. One more thing about this training. If you are DBIDs and you're trying to find information on that, October 15, I am giving a specific training forum marketing discussion with vendors regarding the DBIDs future solicitation. So that's the one you want to be sure not to miss, okay? So let's keep going on Exhibit B, question 4. So this is simple. You take the categories that you respond in 2 or 3. You list them here, but this is a little different. In the first one, we were asking for you to give us the categories that you are responding to based on our marketing and what we need, right? Over here, we're trying to do, I'm sorry, this is the wrong slide. Can I have slide 5? Question 5, I already answered this one. There we go. I was going, okay, this isn't strange. So what this one is, the difference here is that same concept of 4, but instead of number of years that you have sold these items, we want to know how much. So sales, to see how successful you are and how much experience you have on marketing and selling the products you're proposing to sell through these DIR cooperative contracts to our over 6,000 customers base, right? So just take your last 12 months sales and just split them. And again, if you need to enter different market, because this is not directly to DIR contracts and this is not directly to DIR sales, this is your company as a whole. So you can add lines here if you need to. Say you have other markets, you have other stuff, other market segments, you can add that. You can add the entity name that you sold to and the total sales. Now, sometimes Texas agency, you're going to say several agencies, total sale. That's okay, because there's too many of them. You're not going to list each agency. So a little bit of common sense on the numbers. We want to see your sales experience here, okay? The key is to remember the numbers and the category that was listed in the scope of the RFO and on your own answers for the previous questions. Okay, next.
Vanya,
Yes,
Vanya, there's a couple of questions that pertain to services. So are these years of experience only focused on Texas, or can we use organizations outside of Texas or nationwide? And then is there any bias towards companies that haven't done business with the government? And if so, how does that affect a hub or small business trying to get a contract?
Okay, I can answer that. So as I told you before, these are overall company numbers, not direct to DIR contracts. And the next one is you can use all of your sales for your company, not necessary state of Texas. And the next one was, how does it affect if you don't have a DR contract? It doesn't. The scores does not affect that. If you don't have a DR contract, just simply say, we do not have a DR contract. And that would be questions 6, 7, and 8. We can go to that now. Next slide. So over here is talking about if you hold a DIR contract, not necessary, you could hold a contract with, say, DPS or another state agency or a university. Local government contracts, not necessary DIR contracts. Number 6 is specifically other government experience. If you never sold to a government entity at all, just enter NA, not applicable, period. You answered the question. Don't leave it blank because I can't guess. Neither can the evaluators. So must say NA or answer it. Number 7 is about DIR contracts. So this one, we want to know how much experience you have with cooperative contract and DIR, okay? You can add lines depending on how many contracts you have. It is not a requirement to participate on a solicitation to have a current DR contract. We want new vendors. We want new blood into our contract program. So if you don't have anything, just say an A, not a big deal, okay? The next one is our competitors, GSA, NASPO, and TIPS, and there's other boards out there that provides government sales, right? We want to know if you have these. So if you do, just provide us some information, and we're just going to go take a look at your contract, see how long you had it and all that kind of stuff. But I think I need a break. So basically what we want here is for you to either tell us that you have cooperative contract experience or not. If you don't,
Bonnie,
just say nay.
I can take over if you need to take a quick break. You've been talking a while.
Yeah, we're getting ready to go into section C.
Okay.
And go ahead and you can get started, and then I'll catch up.
Okay. All right. So next slide, please. So next slide. This is going to be your marketing and support plan. So things to remember on your marketing and support plan, like we keep saying, answer each question, use the form provided. This is not where we do not want you to submit your marketing materials like you would if you're trying to go out and market and get information from to customers. You're trying to get a contract at this point. So it's a little bit different than trying to make a sale. You're not trying to make a sale to DIR. You're providing information that shows that your company has experience or a plan if you're new to market and support the contract if you're awarded a contract. So this is not a sales pitch. This is your actual marketing and support plan. Make sure that you include any attachments that we do ask for. There are a couple of attachments that we ask for, like an organizational chart. There's a sample form. Make sure that you label and you mark any of the information that we ask for, so it's clearly identified by the evaluators as information that should be included with your response. Make sure you stick to the page limits that we put on there. We put page limits for a reason. Again, there's, for some of these responses, there's several hundred of you responding, and it would take months and months and months to do the evaluation if we left it open-ended. Our evaluators are only required to read up to the page limit. So if you're including information in page limits beyond what we set, they are no longer required to read, and you will not get credit for those answers. Next slide, please.
Hey, Stephanie, we actually had a couple questions for Exhibit B and one for question 5.
Okay.
So I didn't know if we just wanted to answer those real quick. So
I
this one
can do
says for Exhibit B, if it is a teaming opportunity, do we combine experience, or do we only provide experience details for the lead or prime?
You need to present it in the way that your agency or entity is going to support the contract. So if you're utilizing subcontractors, that is a part of your how you're providing the response that needs to be included. It is for the prime vendor to respond. You have to show that you're able to offer the products or services that we're requesting for with the resources that you're describing in your response.
Also, when you're talking about partnership as a vendor, you need to remember that DIR solicitation is strictly for a company. So say 2 companies, just an example is Microsoft and Adobe cannot get together and answer a solicitation. It's
Correct.
either one or the other. They're major companies. So the only way there is information for Exhibit B of any kind of additional, it's going to be where you enter information about your resellers or your subcontractors. And you identify that on Exhibit B so that it's not too confused with your prime company information.
And then one of the other questions was for question 5, what if funding was paid through a grant for an agency like TEA? Would that still count as sales for Texas state agencies?
We're not
Yes.
looking at where you were funded from. It is the who you did business with.
Yeah.
Okay, those are the only ones I saw.
So
Right.
I like to say a few things before we move, Stephanie. I
Okay.
can take over. So 2 things I like to explain to vendors about marketing plans, okay? 1, refrain from the usual suspects, guys that no longer are valid. 5 years ago, email blast was a great thing. Today, not so much. So think about that. The next thing is you can talk about things like you're going to participate in hub forums, or you're going to go visit specific agencies that are needing your product that you feel will be a good fit for your product. So if you have law enforcement software, for example, you can say that you are going to contact law enforcement agencies in Texas, and you're going to make sure to present your contract to them. So keep in mind, this is a marketing plan, how you are going to promote your DIR contract, your products to our customers, okay? Another thing that most vendors do not know is that there is such thing as an LAR, that's a legislative appropriation request. That is a public records, you can ask. And vendors that want to know which agencies in the state of Texas are going to be purchasing IT stuff and the type of IT stuff they're planning to do in the next 2 to 5 years, that's a good document to look into, and it's a good way for you to know where to market your products. Another thing that you need to know is that all Texas agencies' budget, legislative budget board, is also public records. So those are tools for marketing a contract. When I used to work, I didn't always work for the state. Those are documents that are very critical to anyone trying to market it in this type of business. So these are just a little bit of ideas, but I want to make sure that when you prepare a plan, that you understand who your audience is, because our evaluators are looking for how you are planning to market the contract itself, not your company, but your contract with your company and your products. Another thing I want to make sure that you know is that when you provide an organizational chart, this question is related to the team supporting the contract, not your entire corporate company, not your company with your umbrellas and your subsidiaries and etc. It is an organization chart of the team supporting the contract. So who is going to support the sales? Who is going to support marketing? Who is going to do technical support? Who is going to ask customer questions? Who's going to answer those? And if you are an agency of 1 or 2 people or 3, today most people work from home and they're small companies, just show that and show the positions that those persons are going to fulfill within the contract requirements for marketing. Okay. And another thing is, if any of the solicitation requires a service level agreement sample so that we can look at a license agreement or a lease agreement, make sure that you attach it and that you label it correctly based on the instructions of the solicitation, because your evaluator is not going to search over 300 documents to find the one they need to evaluate. So it has to be correctly named, and we're going to talk about naming later. So next slide. Question number 1 is very simple, is what kind of channels you're going to serve. We don't expect you to serve all of the channels that DIR has, all of our marketing channels, but you can pick the ones that you do. And if the ones that you're going to use are not here, out of state, for example, just list it and make sure that you provide us the information, how you're going to approach those marketing. Okay, next slide. So questions 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are specifically describing your company marketing plan areas. So we ask you about what's your support plan? What is your marketing support promotion plan? What you're promoting? What kind of eligible customers? What kind of marketing should you receive an award for? So pay attention to the questions. They're not always the same for every RFO. So read the scope, answer the question based on the RFO scope. Always remember that, okay? Some RFOs are going to have more than 6 questions because they need more marketing than others. and some will have less questions because they're more generic. So pay attention to the form and how it's created and how it's proposed in each RFO plan. Okay, next slide. Support plan. Successful response selected for contract award would be require to maintain a web page. So they're going to ask you, who's going to be the person that is going to be responsible to maintain your web page? You cannot just create the web page, pass the inspections from right after an award, and then forget that page. You're not going to update pricing. You're not going to update product line. You're not going to update your description. You need to maintain your website, okay? And you always need to make sure that your company description and your company information is correct, because all of our customers are going to access that web page, okay? So you need to figure it out who's going to remedy the problems with the website, who is going to respond to customer if there's questions on the website. So these questions are strictly related to your website marketing that DIR requires after the contract award. So you can say, well, I don't have one yet, so I don't know how this goes. Imagine that you have an awarded contract, that you're going to create a website. Make sure you read Appendix A, Section 7, where it talks about your marketing options and what you're required to do. Okay, next slide. So we want to know, these are the two attachments that some RFOs require, others not. So when we say provide it, label as attachment 1 to Exhibit C, attachment 2 to Exhibit C. Don't create these huge elaborate vendor names, file names. Don't just take the document from the ESBD download, fill it up, and put your name, put your company name on the front. That is too long of a name. There's all kinds of restrictions to name sizes. So follow the instructions of the RFO for name convention. And it starts right here with your Appendix C, okay? And remember, links are not acceptable. Very important. Don't send me to your service level agreement on your website. My evaluators are not going to go there. You need to provide the documents as the RFO requires. Next step. Exhibit D is your hub subcontracting plan. This is something that every solicitation will have a specific hub subcontracting plan percentage requirement. Each solicitation will have a pre-proposal conference where hub will come, the hub staff, and give you all the information you need for that solicitation, plus answer any questions for the hub plan as based on the scope of each solicitation. So for today, all I want you to know is that, yes, you must send a hub subcontracting plan. Next step. Every single vendor, it doesn't matter if you're a hub or not. So if you say to me, oh, I am a hub, do I need to fill out a plan? Yes, you do. A plan is a requirement. A hub subcontracting plan can also disqualify you if you don't provide one, and it has to be signed. So don't provide a blank one. That's not going to work. So things to remember. And again, a lot of training is done by the hub group, which is an amazing hub group, by the way. And they will help you. They will provide information. But what you need to learn about this form will give to you by individual RFO. Because there's not a generic question and answer hub plan for everything, because they're very specific to a solicitations and to the percentage that you need to apply. So keep that in mind. Download the latest form. Don't use the document that we provide on the RFO exhibit. Okay, always go download the latest so you're up to date. Do not convert the hub plan to Word. Okay, the CPA form that you download is editable. All vendors must fill out, sign, and submit this form no matter what. Be sure to keep records and add the contact backup information. So if you are a vendor that has submitted your hub plan to so many people that are going to respond for you to show best faith effort, keep all your documentation upload all the documentation. And please make sure that you are uploading the right documentation with the right titles and name conventions, okay? Also, our hub department do provide complimentary review. I strongly recommend that depending on the RFO you're responding to, that you take advantage of this, okay? Next slide. This is another section that is very specific to a solicitation. Itemized pricing spreadsheets are very much based on the solicitation scope. I'm going to go over a few things that are always there, but again, I want you to be careful and respond to it. And next slide. One of the things I want you to know, every RFO requires for pricing form different. Review the requirements carefully. Tab 1 will always give you directions. Pay attention. Okay? And this is just an example. So make sure that you follow the tab 1 of your RFO pricing form. Okay? Next slide. So usually tab 2 is going to be your product detail. Some of them is product detail and services and related services. So pay attention to what the RFO requires. But this is just some of the basics. Yes. So if the instruction says do not create individual tabs by brand, because imagine if you are providing me with 70 brands, you're going to have 70 tabs. So you want to provide everything on the tab 2. You're going to make sure you don't change the formulas. You're going to make sure you copy and paste when adding lines so the formula is copied and pasted correctly. Always, when you copy and paste and adding lines, double check your formulas to make sure they came correctly. All of our formulas have our administrative fee in it, so don't change that. Okay? It's important that you fill out your pricing form based on what we require, because we created these forms to facilitate our evaluation, to minimize the amount of time we spend with each response. So you need to follow the directions for a very specific reason, to save time on the evaluation process, okay? And make sure that you carry the brand name and average discount to the next tab to facilitate your data entry and bid stamping. We're gonna talk about this very in detail this afternoon, bid stamp pricing form. But regardless, the pricing form spreadsheet is required. Bid stamp data entry is not a substitute. Okay, so remember that the following slides are examples, but you need to pay attention to your RFO. Next slide. So normally this is what you see. We ask for a brand, a function, a category, description, sum, part numbers. We want you to give us as much information as possible about what you're proposing to sell, but don't be repetitive. Save yourself some time, okay? This is the column where the formula is. Don't change it, please. And always move the average to the bottom of the brand, because this is by brand, right? Other RFOs have categories. So if I am doing an RFO, say for miscellaneous IT, for example, I will have a hardware section, then I'm going to break it. I'm going to have a software section. I'm going to break it. And then there's going to be a third-party software section. You need to pay attention to what the tab has and make sure that you keep the format. Don't delete categories. Just say NA if you're not bidding on that, because then we don't see the forms the way they are. And if we're going to combine these spreadsheets for evaluations, it's going to take us a lot more time if we have to reformat yours to meet the formatting so that we can do what we need to do. Always pay attention. Next step. Next slide. So most of these will have one of these. Some don't, depending if they're just service or if they're services and hardware. They're always going to ask you to do the average tab. What we're trying to do here is to help you. So when you get to the bid stamp data entry section, you have a summarized thing that tells you what you need to do and it makes it simple. Most of the time, your tab that shows you how to data entry, what you're going to data entry, has the correct field so that you will see the same fields and bid stamp. But always pay attention to each RFO and how it is formatted. Next one. Next slide. Okay, so then you're going to have a service tab. Do not change formulas. Make sure to copy and paste. Double check your formulas. Do not change the spreadsheet format. If there's a field that doesn't apply to you, simply say NA. And always remember to keep it with the RFO scope on hand, so that your services, if our RFO does not allow for development, I don't want to see development services here. I'm just going to make you take it off. If the RFO does not require that you only provide services, so it says you must provide products with service, this is not a service only scope. Then make sure that you have both, because if you propose only services, you're not even going to make it to the competitive break. You're going to be disqualified right off the bat, because the RFO scope did not say that. So always make sure to follow the scope of the RFO and the directions on your forms, okay? Next slide. Trying to hurry here. This one is volume discount. Some vendors do it, some don't. It's not a requirement, but you always will have the option to provide volume discounts to our customers. And it's not evaluated. It's something we need for our own purpose when we're negotiating. So if you're not doing it, just put an A. And always remember that this column, DIR discount, so if your product has a minimum quantity of 5, so your discount for volumes cannot start at 1, it needs to start at 5, because you already gave me the base discount for whatever your minimum quantity is. And if you're giving me a discount for 1 product, when you come over here, this cannot say 1, because that would be your basic discount. So always remember, this has to be above your minimum quantities. That's where this discount belongs. Next slide. So things to remember about pricing. Start by completing the spreadsheet provided. Always complete the spreadsheet provided and upload the spreadsheet in Excel format. Do not PDF your pricing form. Make sure to review the instructions. Each RFO solicitation is unique, so please follow the instructions. Once you complete the spreadsheet, you're going to create your bid stamp pricing form. Follow the instructions, and we're going to go in very detail this afternoon on your bid stamp uploading documents. But you first have to complete all of the forms, all of the requirements before you even think about going into bid stamp, okay? So always create this form and respond to an RFO in the VIS bid stamp will be detailed. We're going to talk about it later, but always remember, you have to fill this out. Bid stamp is not an alternative, or this is not an alternative to not providing bid stamp. Bid stamp is what the evaluations goes. And pricing sometimes is the highest percentage of a solicitation. So if you don't enter it, you don't get evaluated, you might not make the competitive break. So you have to think about that. Next slide. So this is reference forms. Most RFOs is going to request. This might change from time to time. Some RFO might not want it. Some do, but it's an option. And one of the things that we ask you to do, go ahead, change. Always CC yourself when you are sending out emails to your customers to fill out the form, okay? If a customer tells you our agency doesn't allow us to give written reference forms, then they can send us an email to the RFO email that says that, and we can look into if we need to. DIR discretion, we can call, we can discuss it, those kind of things. Always make sure your customers know to send your forms to the RFO email box. If they send it to you and you upload to bid stamp, that is not valid. So keep in mind, they have to email it to us directly. Make sure the reference you are requesting are related to the scope of the RFO. Again, if somebody gives me a reference for development projects and I am asking for hardware reference sales, and it doesn't make any sense. So watch it. This is not a reference of character in per se. It's a combination of experience with the products you're proposing and a reference based on your customer sales, how well you serve them, okay? And how well you use the contract, the DIR. These references are not to be scored individually. They are always part of your Exhibit B. So we take all your reference, the evaluators will read the reference, and they will combine that with the experience information on Exhibit B, and together they will make your score, okay? It's recommended that this form do not be sent through Bitstamp, and I will explain that later today. It's a system thing. We recommend that if you, like a lot of vendors will call me and say, I need to know if my references were submitted. Well, if you have your customer CC you, when they send it to the email box, you have those records for yourself, okay? Next. Accessibility forms is very simple. There's going to be each RFO will have accessibility requirements. Each RFO, go ahead and go to the next slide. Each RFO will have an accessibility section within your pre-proposal conference and your marketing conferences that tells you exactly what to do, that tells you exactly how to follow, how to fill out these forms based on the RFO scope at hand, okay? DIR accessibility group is amazing. They're always willing to help. We have accessibility workshops. We have accessibility training. We have accessibility coffee hours every 2 months or every other month. So there's a lot of resources to help you fill this out. But basically, if you're a reseller, you just need to get your company to provide their ACRs, the corporate aid. You don't fill out these forms if you're a reseller. Your manufacturer provides them to you, okay? The PDAA, on the other hand, just remember that's about your company, not the products, okay? And VATSR is something that's required for development projects only. So RFO, scope, then accessibility, you will get the information at the pre-proposal conferences, okay? Next. Now, simple documents, go next. So 2 things I need to tell you, that simple documents are just that, simples. So when you get a contract template, don't enter each section of the contract template that is highlighted for me to put your name, your information, or whatever service master or agreements your contract will have. Your contract template is simply that, is a template for you to look at the terms to see if any of those terms you need to take an exception to. But it's not for you to complete it, so that, and not for you to sign. It's just an example. So don't add those to your exemption form, because they're not exemption if you're just filling out the contract information, okay? Scope of work is also a simple service level agreement master. These are documents that DIR has created. So to alleviate having to spend a lot of time looking at 300 brand service level agreements. So we created one, if you want to. Most of the time, some RFOs will say those things get negotiated at the customer level. Some RFO will require that you submit them for review and additional exhibits within the contract document set. So keep that in mind, okay? But remember, these are examples. They're not the exact things, and a lot of these will get filled out at the time of customer sales. Scope of work, for example, is just a sample. It is not a solicitation scope of work. It's a scope of work document that you might get from a customer to provide quotes for what they want, okay? So read the documents and understand their samples. Next. Bid submittal. So if you have a disability and you cannot provide us with any section of the RFO requirements, you can tell your procurement lead and we'll make accommodation as necessary. Next. So quick reminders, questions and answers today are unofficial. I don't know if we're going to post. Normally, DIR will post questions and answers to any RFO solicitation information. This training is a little different. I want you to remember to look to the ASBD when you're responding to a normal solicitation. Those solicitations will always have addendums that post all the Q&As that you provide the procurement lead. Any changes to additional information regarding any RFO are also posted to the ESPD. So vendor's number one job that I call is keep up with your ESPD checks. Don't expect DIR to be your main contact of information. The law does not require that we do that. We do it a lot because we're great and fantastic company. And DIR wants vendors to absolutely be informed. We have lots of other options for information. We have social media. We post things to our website. We do Twitter. We do Facebook. We do all kinds of things to make sure you vendors are informed. But ultimate, your responsibility, guys, to keep up with it, not ours, okay? Just want to make sure you understand. So next one. So let's do the do's and don'ts. Do's and don'ts to responding to a solicitation. Next slide. Maintain your registration accurate and active. And that means all of your registration, not just one or two. Always sign your Exhibit A and upload the signed document. I had at least 3 vendors disqualified on my last solicitation because their Exhibit A weren't signed. And they tried to protest and they tried to complain, but the law is what it is. A blank check doesn't allow me to cash it. An unsigned Exhibit A is not telling me that you are committing to anything. So Exhibit A, signature is a must. Always sign and upload your Hub subcontracting plan. Please sign your Hub subcontracting plan. Fill out your pricing spreadsheet, not just bid stamp. And always create the bid stamp pricing form based on the spreadsheet that you filled out. Always press the submit button. If you just leave it there, when we pull the responses, if it's not submitted, it's not coming through. And once that RFO closes, no matter how much you cry, no matter how much legislative people you know, no matter how many contacts you have, it is not going to fly. The law is super strict about this. You must submit your response. Imagine if we were back when, I'm that old, back when we would have boxes of binders, you would have to create a binder and copy it 5 times and bring it to us in big box. Guess what? If the bid closed at 2 and you were in the elevator, too bad. It's over. Same thing with the system. When the system hits 2 o'clock, it'll shut down. So always press the submit button. Next slide. Here's the things I don't want you to do. Don't forget to sign all documents for your submission. Always remember, request excessive number of exemptions to T's and C's can disqualify you. Okay. Another thing about exceptions that I like to remind vendors is that when we come to the table to negotiate, please have the right people at the table, because the time of our legal department is so small and we don't want to waste anybody's time. Make sure that your people at the table negotiating these contracts actually understand government processes and contract law. Because when you ask me an exemption for you not to pay the administrative fee, that tells me right off the bat, you do not understand government procurement, because that's not an option. Okay? So always remember that. If you're coming to the table with exceptions and you're going to negotiate major exceptions, bring the right person to the table. And when you hire a lawyer to review your solicitation exceptions, make sure they know government law, government contracting law, because a lot of these newbies out there are asking for exceptions that I cannot do based on the law. So if an exemption, if a term and condition has a legal citing to it or a government code attached to it, I cannot change it, neither can DIR. Only the legislative can change it. And they meet every 2 years, so I don't think you want to wait for that. So remember that. Contact anyone during a solicitation outside the procurement lead and approve contract contacts. No, you will be disqualified. Okay? Miss meetings and opportunities to learn more about the RFO in question. So if there is a marketing forum, if there is a pre-proposal conference, attend it, or at least go to YouTube and listen to it afterwards. Be in the know, always informed. These solicitation might not have money, quantities, or purchase attached to it, but they can make a big difference on your company. You got to take these solicitations serious. Just because you had a contract for 10 years doesn't mean you're going to get another one. Just because the RFO last year requires certain thing, this one is different. The scope is different. Your answers needs to be follow the RFO scope. Next slide. All right, guys, we answered some of the questions. We can certainly answer some more. Go ahead. The hub office will take the questions now and we can try to answer them.
Okay, so there are quite a few. So this one says, are the solicitations easy to understand, read, or comprehend? Are the expectations realistic? Are they meant for all small businesses, anyone between 1 to 500 employees?
So
Absolutely.
the solicitation is meant for anybody who's qualified to respond. They can be a manufacturer or a reseller that's eligible to respond to the solicitation. These are IT solicitations, so it's technology only. Everything that's not technology goes through the comptroller's office, which is different than DIR. We have the instructions in there. We provide a pre-bid solicitation conference where we can answer additional questions. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible, but you do need to read and follow the instructions.
Okay, the next one says, what is the timeline to each step of the process of solicitation?
So on the DIR side, it varies. It varies depending on the type of solicitation, the scope, how many respondents we have. So it varies. It can be anywhere from solicitation from planning until we actually start negotiating and awarding contracts is not going to be any sooner than 6 to 9 months because our planning process takes several months.
Okay, this one says, ESBD has an awards no solicitation section. How can we take advantage of that?
You need to contact the comptroller's office.
Yeah.
That's their system.
But remember, award solicitation section of ESBD is plenty to fulfill a legal requirement of procurement to post awards to be so that vendors know who's getting what. It's not necessarily something for you to take advantage of from my experience, but I would say contact the controllers to see what else that is for.
Okay, this one says there are a lot of steps involved. Do you have a simple checklist of steps to follow up to the final stage for negotiations?
So for negotiations, you're given your instructions in an email if you make it to negotiations. As far as the solicitation, all of our pre-bid conferences for the past at least 5 years are posted on YouTube. You can go and look at the old solicitations, look at the old documents that can give you some guidance on what to expect. This is another training that we've provided here. And then in each solicitation, there's a checklist to follow on the solicitation to submit.
Okay, this one says, can DIR help an agency with statement of work response formats? I understand the DIR has to approve agencies' SOWs, but several SOWs response requirements many times are repetitive or unclear, need better organization in the SOW response format. It is very time consuming for a vendor to respond to an SOW with unclear instructions.
Not our area.
Yeah, that's a different area, but The SOWs, we are required to review them for state agencies only. It's not all of our customer agencies. So we don't have the resources to do that for all 2,000 customers.
Okay, this one says, which agencies have released BPAs under Texas DIR contracts?
Bulk purchase agreements are posted on the DIR website. You can search that on the DIR website.
This one says, is there a fee associated with DIR award? Is there a monthly fee, total sales when you sell to DIR members? Even if we are awarded the cooperative, do we still need to submit competitive bids along with other awardees? How does DIR compare to Region 7 tips and buy board?
So I'm going to answer part of this. I'm going to have Vanya answer part of this, but there is an administrative fee for cooperative contracts. That fee can be included in the final price to the customer. You pay that monthly to DIR. It depends on the type of contract you're awarded as to what the administrative fee is, but it's anywhere from 0.5 to 0.7 to 1% on most cooperative contracts. That is due monthly. And then you work with your contract manager, and they will, if you get a contract award, and they do a little bit more training on how to submit that monthly fee in your monthly sales report. Even if we are awarded a cooperative, we still need to submit competitive bids along with other awardees. Vanya probably has a pretty good explanation for this due to her past experience. So I'll let her address that one.
So you need to remember that our cooperative contract program is not an e-commerce. We're not Amazon. It doesn't look like our customer's not going to go in there and just select stuff and buy it. Every government agency has a specific requirements. DIR itself for information technology have a requirement that some, depending on the threshold of dollars spent, 1 to 3 vendors from a cooperative contract needs to submit quotes to that purchaser. And depending on the dollar amount, up and down, up to 6. So the important thing to know here is that you are going to be contacted to request quotes. You are having competitive opportunities with other cooperative contract programs. Most customers are going to send you a quote for real money, real quantity. So they are going to look for volume discount based on their purchase, and they're going to negotiate the best value for their agency. So it all depends on their internal process. Some agency says, pick a contract and sign and go for a specific item. Some say up to $5,000, you can get just one quote. For each agency process is different. They have to follow the minimum requirements for information technology purchasing that DIR requires. And that is based on the threshold chart. So if you're a brand new vendor to DIR, the one thing you need to know about sales is that we're not an e-commerce. So the buy board, it's almost like e-commerce. You go in, you select something, a vendor, you buy from them. DIR cooperative contract requires more step. You go directly to the customer, not to us. You pay monthly sales fees, sales report, you follow up your sales report, then you're going to pay your fee for the month sales that you were completed, that you were paid, not that you quoted, not that is pending for delivery. Your sales report fees are paid based on actual completion of a delivery and a project. Okay, next.
Using the DBITs as an example, are hub firms allowed on the initial contract proposal team? And will the qualifications of those firms be considered in the evaluation of the overall team? Or will only the qualifications of the prime firm considered?
I'll say for the DBITs, we're going to look at the scope first. You need to look at the scope of the RFO, what is written and what it allows. The hub subcontracting plan will allow you to provide us with all your subcontractors. You can use their experience based on the categories that you're bidding when you fill out your Appendix B, Exhibit B, and that will be evaluated based on what you write. Okay? But remember, partners cannot respond to an RFO. You're either a prime vendor or you are a subcontractor or a reseller for a prime vendor. Two companies cannot get together and be in one contract. So Microsoft and Adobe cannot get together and solicit and respond to a solicitation. Okay, next.
This one says, why does Bitstamp doesn't show up any RFP?
Not quite sure what that question means. However, each solicitation for DIR cooperative contracts requires you to submit your Bitstamp is our submission portal. And so that's where vendors go to submit their responses to the solicitation. It's not a separate like response opportunity. That is the platform that's our current e-procurement platform for vendors to submit their responses. And you get instructions on your particular solicitation within those individual solicitations.
And a solicitation name will not show up on the Bitstamp portfolio section. And we're going to talk about this afternoon until it is posted. Pre-solicitation form are not posted on the ESPD, and it's not going to show up on Bitstamp. When a solicitation is officially posted and notices go out and the response period begins, that's when you will see it listed in the Bitstamp section of open solicitations. Next question.
Okay, can a newly formed joint venture qualified for award based on the fund and past performance of the two JV partner companies?
Yeah, this one kind of goes back to what I said. Two companies cannot get together and solicit a contract, respond to a solicitation. One or the other has to be the prime and the other one has to be the subcontractor. There is no joint solicitation response within the program that we are doing. Next.
ITSAC is annual, correct? Is that the same for DBIDs?
Nope. ITSAC's not annual, neither is DBIDs. This is depending on the solicitation scope. You will see the term of these contracts. Once a contract is awarded, it's either a 4, 5, or 6 years. You have to look at the scope to see the term of the contract. Once the solicitation is negotiated and a contract is awarded, it will tell you on the RFO what the term of each contract is. DIR will post solicitations for all of our different categories of the solicitations that we do: law enforcement, software, HP hardware, Dell hardware, whatever it is that we're bidding or soliciting. We do that every 4 years. So, or we start planning within the 2nd or 3rd year of the awarded contract's date and time, and then we should be able to have that solicitation completed before the period 4 years or 5 years, whatever is completed, depending on the solicitation. Okay, next.
Okay, we provide a lot of services that we believe we would qualify us for this DIR solicitation. Can we present multiple services in the application?
So
there is no DIR application.
Right.
There is no DIR application. Please, there is no DIR application. You will respond to a solicitation, and you will respond to the solicitation based on the scope. DBIDs is a solicitation for several different categories. If the services you are providing fits on the category of a solicitation, you're welcome to respond to qualify for evaluation and proceed to making the competitive break and then proceeding to negotiations to a contract. But be careful. You must meet the solicitation scope. And if the solicitation says you cannot bid services alone, pay attention to that. DBIDs is a services. ITSAC is services only. So pay attention to the scope. It will tell you what you can and cannot do. Next.
Okay, so use other to indicate services provided to private commercial companies.
On Exhibit B experience section, that's asking how much and what kind of market, what kind of marketing you're doing to what segments. Yes, you can use other to put in the experience you have selling to other besides government. Again,
So if,
pay attention to the scope. Those questions might be different.
sorry, this one says, if we are a staffing consulting firm, would we explain that as the type of consulting or staffing that we do?
It all depends on the solicitation. Again, staffing is different than consulting. Staffing is ITSEC, and ITSEC is closed, and it won't be rebid for a couple years, or maybe sooner. I'm not sure, but I'm saying 2 to 3 years. That's when you provide staffing to go to our location and work on specific sections that the customer requires work to be done. It's more like a supplemental staff. DBIDs is services. It's based on categories. I'm not sure if consulting is going to be one of those categories, because consulting has different meaning in government. IT, information technology consulting, might be involved, but there is a law about consulting that we have to do specific types of solicitation with specific extra steps. So we always say that DIR solicitation doesn't include consulting based on this law, and it's in every RFO. So pay attention to that. But if the services you provide fits within the scope, you can certainly respond to a solicitation.
Okay, if there's been no work done for a government agency or entity, how do we indicate services provided?
NA. Just say NA. Not
Okay.
applicable.
Do you have weightage definitions for each of these exhibits which are exposed to vendors?
Each solicitation will give you the specific evaluation criteria and weight for each solicitation. So you will see appendix exhibit B, vendor experience. It will have a percentage, 30, 35 of the 100%. You will see that on each solicitation, RFO section, when it talks about evaluation criteria. Okay?
Okay, what if we worked as a sub only in government projects?
Yes, and you are trying to provide a solicitation now as a prime, then you can use that data as part of your sales experience.
Does being a protege under a DIR contract give you a leg up?
Under evaluation, we do not have a legal quota for hub vendors or protege or any of that. The hub program is very specific, and I will let you, when we do the pre-proposal conference or the market event where hub comes to speak, that would be a question for them. But on the evaluation criteria for solicitation, hub vendors or protege do not get extra credit or additional percentage. It's all based on the prime vendor and the information provided.
Hi there, what if all our experience and clients were from working for other companies? No tours?
So you used to be a 1099 contractor for several companies, and now you formed your own company and you want to show that experience as part of your proposal. Just make sure that you explain that on your exhibit B that says, my experience is based on being a contractor under 1099 for the following companies, and then put down the experience in reference to the scope of the RFO and the qualifying pieces of that RFO.
Okay. If a company does not have prior experience, is there still an opportunity for them to succeed in winning an award? What strategies can new companies use to break into this space?
Well, if you are a newly formed company, you can use your knowledge and experience. So if you formed a company yesterday, but you've been selling software as an employee several times, or doing the services as an employee, you can use that experience. We do not penalize brand new vendors. We try our best to make sure that there's options and there's opportunity, but we cannot make up or give up extra credit for new vendors If the RFO requires 5 years of experience, then 5 years of experience is what we need. Our solicitations don't usually have that. So just pay attention to the scope and the requirements for the solicitation itself. So you will know if it can be worked out.
Okay. I wanted to clarify something that was just said. It was stated that the state is
So,
looking for new
this one-
blood.
Hold on a sec. This one's very specific to a solicitation response, and we were not involved in that solicitation response. So this sounds like they need to ask that of. There's a different format for this specific question because it's in relation to a very specific response. However, for those of that have submitted for DIR before, and you were not awarded a contract, if you did not take advantage of the debrief opportunity, you missed out. There was a timeline to take advantage of a debrief opportunity. If you were not awarded a contract previously, that goes over everything in your response and how it relates. I will say that for DBITS, which is the deliverable-based IT services, and for ITSAC, there are hundreds of vendors that respond. We do not award every vendor that has responded. So even if you think you scored really well or you scored high, you got to take into consideration there's probably about 200 other vendors that scored a little bit higher or just as well as you did. So it depends on where that competitive break sits in comparison to the number of responses that are received. So it's not just, we don't always award based on a defined competitive break. It's procurement specific, solicitation specific. And it's also contingent upon how many responses we received. If we did not receive enough responses, we may opt to negotiate with everybody who responded. And by enough, I mean enough to meet our customers' needs. These are $0 awards. So DIR is not paying anything for any of these contracts. They are being awarded for our customers to utilize like they would utilize any other consortium cooperative type. But there's several different things that previous vendors that have responded and did not get an award should have taken advantage of, and the debriefing was one of those. And then when you're trying to respond to a new solicitation, make sure you go to the pre-bid solicitation conferences.
I
We can
believe our
already-
time for Q&A is almost over.
Yeah,
Because we're about to have to go into the next one.
So what
So
I
the-
like to do is have vendors that didn't get their answers to email me for the answers, so that they can have everything they need to be successful with their responses. So go ahead and send me the questions and I will try to email you the answers. If I don't have it, I'll find it and send it to you.
Well, Vanya, I can actually pull a report for the
That'll be great.
questions, so.
I can also use that and send you guys an email with the ones that did not get answered.
all right. I think
sorry.
we're gonna wrap this
Please.
training
Yes,
up.
before the
So-
next one.
The 1 o'clock training is on the Bitstamp portal specifically. So it's a different training from this one. And that is to how to utilize the Bitstamp portal to submit your solicitation response.
Okay. Sorry, just typing in some emails. All right, so we will see y'all at the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.